Hey gang, so first things first, for those of you that totally geeked out about my Sarah Angel t-shirt from last time, let me show you this. This is a limited edition Sarah Angel statue. Still in the box, for now. Huh? Huh? Pretty cool, huh? Well, yes, I am in fact a big hunkin' nerd. Why do you ask? Okay, on to something a little more relevant. Based on the number of yes votes I got, it sure looks like I'm going to be reading the Bible to you folks. I mean, not out loud, of course. I'm going to read it and then tell you what I think. And I decided, hey, let's get a professional opinion. So I decided to interview a pastor. Had to go to about 3 or 4 churches before I found one willing to give me an interview on the spot, but this one guy stepped up. I'm going to show you what he said to me. So, for the record, who are you?
I am Reverend Dr. James Kearny, pastor of Capitol Hill Presbyterian Church.
Oh, well, hi, I'm Kate Farr, YouTuber, also known as BionicDance.
BionicDance. Sweet.
Yeah, it's actually a reference to a cartoon show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What are you a doctor of?
Doctor of Divinity.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. So I'm here today to talk about which version of the Bible I should read.
Okay.
Because I am a kind of a skeptical thinker, and I'd like to find out which version of religion is true, honestly. Mm-hmm. Now, I've often said, if God were to show up and say, that one's my book, not these others, that one's mine, that's the one I'd read.
Good.
You know, but of course, religion demands faith of us, you know,
right.
Which I would define as belief without proof.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess basically what I'm asking is, like, if I were to read a version of the Bible and just forget the whole, you know, I don't like faith part, which one should I read?
Well, I would read the version that makes the most sense to you.
Okay.
Okay, because these are translations, and they're translations from the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and therefore English is always changing. You know, so the King James is an excellent translation. I've studied and worked with both the Greek and the Hebrew. My Aramaic is not so good, but
that's all right. I speak a tiny bit of Japanese, and that's it.
Oh, nice. And the King James is an absolutely beautiful translation, but it was done in 1611.
Right.
And English has changed. Now it's like Shakespeare is glorious when it comes to the English language, but it's difficult to understand at first because it's we don't speak that way anymore.
Right.
So
very Shakespearean.
Yeah, and it was written at the same time, right after Shakespeare.
I've heard people think or suggest that maybe Shakespeare had a hand in helping out write it, but I don't know if that's true.
Shakespeare had a hand in shaping the English language, and I think at that point, any of the scholars would have known his plays, and therefore would have probably been shaped by it. Actually, there was another earlier translation by Tyndall that was done 60 years earlier that they borrowed heavily from because his English was so wonderful, his phrasing was so wonderful. But we are now, exactly 400 years later, from 1611 to 2011. Therefore, I like this other version, which is called Today's New International Version, just because it's more recent, and it also has a lot of Americanisms in it as well, as opposed to being English.
How many times is the word bodacious used?
Well, it's not that current.
No, okay.
There's not a lot of slang in it.
Okay.
But it's really good. It's a translation and not a paraphrase.
Okay.
Paraphrase can be really helpful because a lot of times it breaks it down into a little easier way to understand. But you also make interpretive moves, meaning whenever you go from the original language to the translation, you're having to interpret it. So there's a lot of words that have a number of different meanings, which you have to select on one particular English word, and so you make interpretive moves. So that's why when I went to school, they required me to learn Hebrew and Greek so that when I preach, I read it in the original in order to help give my explanation of the text a more nuanced reading, so I can say, well, this is what some of these words mean. It doesn't quite mean what you think it means here.
That is something I've heard a lot from people, is they have a lot of cognitive dissonance about some of the things that are in these books, simply because they've been translated in a way where it doesn't mean in here what it did in the original.
Right.
And so, I can see how having that grounding in the original languages would certainly help. At least, transmit the, I don't know, is the right message the way to put it, or just...
Right, what the original authors intended.
Right.
But I'll tell you, there's no other... Let me say not a scholarly level, but a personal level. I have lived for the last 30 years as if the words of the Bible were true.
Right.
And that takes a leap of faith, but it's not a leap into the dark. What I have found in the last 30 years is that the words have been true. Absolutely true, and that I've entered into a wider world that has been more profound than anything I could have possibly imagined on my own. These are not, for me, I agree with what the church says, is that these are not just the words of men and women. These are the words of God, given to us in order to show us who God is, in order to show us how we can find our way back to Him.
Okay.
So when you say it's faith is a decision you make without proof, yes, but we do that in daily life.
True. I personally try to gather as much information as I can before I come to a conclusion.
Yes.
And so, yes, there are times where you have to basically make a kind of leap of faith, but I try to make it as informed a leap as possible.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to be confrontational. I know there are things in the Bible that have been shown to be at least questionable by science. If nothing else, just the formation of the universe, for one thing, and its age. And I don't know for your church if you believe that the Earth is about 6,000 years old, or if it's about, was it like 14 billion or however much it is.
Sure.
I don't know.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
What does science have to say with Scripture? I believe in science, and I love scientists and Christians. Most of the scientific principles that we have that are axiomatic in our world today were developed by Christians in Europe, in Western civilization, which basically is the Christianization of the barbarian tribes, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths in Europe, also with the Romans and the Latin and the Greek culture. But science is just the exploration of God's world, and it's unbelievably glorious what scientists have discovered. And where we get into trouble is where Christians begin to try to treat this like a science book. It's not. If you ask questions, you shouldn't have, when you ask questions that it's not trying to answer, you're going to get bad answers.
Okay.
It's not a science book, meaning that it's not, that the stories of creation are not there in order to provide a geological explanation of the origin of the cosmos. They're not.
Okay. So when it says 6 days, I hear a lot of religious people say...
It doesn't mean literal days.
Okay.
Because also with the Hebrews, when you talk about numbers and days and stuff like that, they're not as scientific as our culture is. American culture uses words with greater precision when it comes to engineering. English is a great language for engineering, just like Italian is a great language for poetry.
Okay.
Everything rhymes in Italian, and therefore you get great, and there's a lot of emotive words in Italian. Our language is really good for engineering manuals, just like Greek is a great language for philosophical discourse, because their words can be used for a greater subtlety of thought than American words. Let's say the word love. We have one word for love.
Right.
And that means everything. But for the Greek, you got words for romantic love, erotic love, for a specific word for motherly love, another word for the love between friends, another word for God's love. So it's the Greek language is better for philosophy. So we get in trouble when it comes to turning this into a science book and saying day for the Hebrews meant 24 hours, when they're saying, no. We just set a period of, what we're trying to communicate is that God created the world and he did it in an orderly fashion. Not that at the end of 6 24-hour periods, he had the whole thing done.
Right. So how is there an easy way to tell which bits to take literally and which bits to take figuratively? I mean, because I've spoken to a lot of people who gave conflicting accounts of which way to go. And my purpose in trying to read the Bible is to see if I can get out of it what people who already believe it do. To see if I can empathize.
Sure.
And I would find that difficult if I were reading it just either straight up literally or straight up figuratively. And so I need a handy guide to know how to interpret the Bible.
Well, C.S. Lewis once talked about, I thought it was very handy when he talked about literary analysis, because there's many different forms of literature in the Bible. You'll find history, you'll find poetry, you'll find parable, you'll find simile, you'll find a lot of different types of literature. And sometimes it's helpful just to say, is this a story to express something that is larger than something is this a story to try to talk about something that's abstract? You know, because I think when you get to the very beginning of the world or the very end, so Genesis, the first 10 chapters of Genesis or the book of Revelation, it becomes, you have to resort to metaphor and allegory because the concepts that they're talking about are larger than you could describe scientifically.
Right.
So I would say literary. Try to figure out, is this poetry now? Is this a story now? Or is this a history now?
Right.
And it'll become obvious when you start to read it that way.
Okay.
That's one. I say that's one technique.
Fair enough.
I say the other is you can talk to people who have studied it, so it's not just you.
Right.
You know, you can find someone who knows the Bible. You can come to a church, and a lot of times what I look for the type of people that it produces. You know how it is where they say consider the source.
Right.
You find someone who is honest and smart and good and trustworthy. You're going to be more apt to listen to that person when they talk about a subject than if they are crafty or if they're sneaky or if they're dishonest or if they're, I don't know, cheater.
Fair enough. How about if they're an incurable goofball like me?
Even better, because then it's fun.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that doesn't answer every question because I have a lot of specific ones.
Sure.
You know, little issues that I look at and I'm like, I don't know about that. But but as an overall thing for like how I should read these, I think that pretty much tells me what I want to know.
Good. Well, how fun to meet a new goofball.
Yeah.
As one goofball to another. I really appreciate you asking these questions because most people don't care.
Yeah.
You know, they'll go, well, the Bible, that's boring. Or they'll just say, that's a book of lies. And they're just trying to get your money or they're just all pedophiles. Or I mean, I've had things, you know, in the blogosphere. It's unbelievable in terms of people tearing down Christianity and pastors. And a lot of times I don't recognize the pastors and the Christianity. Yes, there are those monsters out there, but they don't define what mostly is going on.
You know, the funny part is that describes so well the experience that a lot of atheists have, where it's like, you know, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, all of those guys, you know, thrown right in atheist faces.
Sure.
And it's like, you know, well, sure, they didn't believe in God, but that didn't necessarily drive the atrocities they committed.
They did make
you know,
monsters.
there are plenty of atheists out there that you can point to that we would at least define as really good people.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I've got a really good friend who's an atheist. He's my one atheist friend who I know well enough I can joke with, and he is one of the most moral, good people that I know.
Yeah,
absolutely. He gives a good face to atheism.
Well, I I mean, a lot of us try. I mean, okay, I admit on my YouTube channel, I'm not perhaps always as charitable as I could be.
Yeah.
But, it's usually in the name of humor.
Sure.
Although, I have to say that it's nice to meet someone who's religious where I'm not going, wow, this guy's way out there. Because, we may disagree on some things, but, heck, I've got very religious relatives. I mean, we're talking Italian Catholics here.
Nice.
And we get along just fine. So, it is difficult at times to divorce people from the stereotypes. I've noticed that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When you read the newspaper, I always accept the newspaper as true. I'm one of those innocents. And it's interesting, if ever I read something in the newspaper about something that I know, usually I'll go, wait a minute, that's not right.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much that's happening with other ways that they report on things. Because newspaper reporters are supposed to be experts on everything. And a lot of times they're not. They're opinionated, and they create. So you have to meet real people,
right,
in order to get a better vision of what it is to be Muslim or an atheist or or a Christian or a pastor or a priest or
we've certainly noticed people treating Muslims like every last one of them's a terrorist lately.
Sure.
And I'm sure that Catholics get it a lot because of those priests.
Yeah, you get those. I know you get those monsters, those few monsters, which. Anyway, don't get me started.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me. It was
good.
And thank you for agreeing to be on camera.
Hi, everybody.
So as you can see, he was pretty open and willing to answer any questions I had. And I have to once again thank Pastor Carney for, taking the time out of his day. And you guys were right. They did, in fact, give me a copy of their version of the Bible. But I have to decide, okay, more modernized language or King James? Which way do I go? Not gonna ask you guys to vote like I did with the should I read the Bible at all thing. Just tell me in comments whether you think I should go for one or the other. So thanks to those of you who stuck around through the entire interview. I'm glad you were that interested in what we had to say. Anyway, I will catch you evil geniuses later.